There are a couple of features that Squarespace has released recently as part of their new platform updates and Fluid Engine that might be a little bit confusing. In fact, I get questions about these features pretty frequently, and a couple of them are so new that either people don't know they exist yet or they're not really sure what they mean, and so they haven't tried to use them. So today we're going to cover those 4 features. That includes the scale text feature and how to not screw that up, and also the text highlight feature, the pin block feature, and the ability to hide and show the header and or footer on any page of your website. So before we dive into that though, who am I to talk about Squarespace? My name is Caitlin and I run Launch the Damn Thing. I am a Squarespace designer and educator. I've been a graphic designer for ages and I've been designing websites at Squarespace since 2016. So I know a thing or 5, and I'm also in the know as a circle member. So I can give you my knowledge here on the YouTubes and hopes that it makes your DIY design a little bit easier and faster. So on that note, let's dive in and look at these 4 features. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the scale text feature, and that one's not an intuitive feature to use because what it actually does is take the selected text and resize the font size on each line to fit the full width of whatever size the text box is, which basically means if you're not careful whether you have a soft return like this, where it is Shift Enter, or a hard return, I may be getting this backwards by the way, or just pressing Enter on your keyboard, the difference is that there's a little bit more space when each of these lines are separate paragraphs. Okay, so I have scale with text on for the whole thing right now. And because this is just one single space in between the 2 lines, they're sizing together. It's going to keep both lines at the same font size, and the font size is going to be dictated by whatever can fit inside this block. So if I resize, they size up together at the same rate. So they're going to be at equal heights. Notice that the letters here are probably exactly the same as the letter height down here. The difference is if I instead do a hard return, whatever the difference is, if I just press Enter and start a new paragraph, each of them are going to be sized at different rates. So this one is going to look smaller because it has more letters and it's fitting the full width of this block. But this one has fewer letters, so the letters inside this word can be much larger to fit the full width. I'm hoping this makes sense. So again, if you're wanting them to be sized at the same rate, if you want them to look like the same paragraph, then you want to make sure that space is just a regular single space and not like a full break between paragraphs. Squarespace will naturally put more space between paragraphs than it will between lines in the same paragraph, and that's the difference. So if you want to keep them together and sized at the same rate, then they need to be contained in the same paragraph essentially. So to force that, you just want to do Shift Enter and then select it together and turn it on together at the same time. And if you want them to be separate, then turn it off and just do a separate space and turn it on at the same time. So this is one paragraph and that's one paragraph, and the space between them means that this one will size up at a different rate. If you want even more control, then of course you can actually just duplicate this box. Let's move it out of the way for a second. Click here and delete the services word, and then we'll drag this box up. We'll move this one over and we'll delete the first half in this one, and then we'll turn that on. Now you can drag them wherever you want. Just make sure that the boxes themselves are not actually overlapping, otherwise the text could potentially run into each other. So this one, we want to align that to the top. That's as close as it can get. See, for example, if you put them here, it looks really nice. Potentially the letters could overlap with each other in a way you're not expecting on smaller size screens. So just be aware that that's a possibility and check for that. Okay, so now let's look at what happens on mobile. Anytime you are editing anything in Squarespace, you always want to pay attention to the mobile icon. If it has a blue dot, that means whatever change you just made will affect the layout or something in the visual space of the mobile editor. So let's go take a look at that. So we added a duplicate of this block, and now that's putting it down here. So we just want to drag it up, and I'm going to ignore these bullets because that's just my note. Pretend like they're not there. That'll do. All right, so let's go back. So that's the scale text feature. Now let's move on to the highlight text feature. If we scroll down to this section, you can see a few of these highlights in action. This one has a highlighted underline, this one has a highlighted circle, and this one has a highlighted scribble. To do this, all you have to do is select the text and then select this icon in the rich formatting bar. If you hover over it, it'll tell you that it's the highlight. So if you select that, you have this drop down that gives you all these options. These are the only ones that you have to pick from. So for example, if I wanted to change that to a back, like a literal drawn highlight kind of thing, I could do that. I could make it rounded corners. Hopefully you can see that behind the selection there. You can also turn on the animation. You can have it set to draw, fade and scale. I like the draw function because that just seems the most natural to me. And you can change the duration of the animation and the direction of the animation, whichever way it draws in. You can also bring it to the front, but I don't see any point in being able to do that unless it's transparent. So if you want to make the color transparent, you just select the color and then change the opacity of it here. Lately, when you do that this way, you lose all preview of whatever it looks like until you save and then exit the editor, but it is actually doing what it says it's doing. You just can't see it here in the preview. So lately I've been not changing it with that transparency slider, and I've been doing it under custom instead. If you have it selected on RGB, then you can change the opacity this way. And just as a side note, if you don't know the RGB color code and you only know the hex code, you can put the hex code color in first and then switch it to RGB, and it'll keep the color, but it'll reformat the color code into RGB instead. And that way you can use the transparency slider. Okay, so now it's back on the underline. We'll double check those settings. We've got underline. We have the corners or the edges of the actual underline itself rounded, and you can control the thickness of the underline with this slider. Fun fact, if it's not quite thin enough, you can actually type in pixels instead. 1px will be a lot smaller. Okay, so that is the underline version. This one is the circle. So the only difference is that we've changed the color and we've selected a different shape. So we'll just click on that again. And then down here, it's still set to animation. It's still set to draw. And if I wanted that to animate just a little bit more slowly, I could draw it out up to 2 seconds. And then if I want it to circle to the left instead of the right, I can change the direction. I'm actually going to take that down just a little bit. There we go. And on this one, same thing. We've changed the color and we've changed the shape of the underline. So we're going to thin that out a bit. It's still on round, it's still on animation, it's still on draw, and we can change the duration of that squiggle. There we go. So that's the text highlight. This one has been around for over a year now, but I think people are not sure of all the intricacies of how to use it, and I think it can be really fun to play with. So I wanted to make sure we talked about it today. Okay, so the next option is the pin block, and that is really new as of posting this video. This is something that you might have noticed with the little pin icon. So actually, let's get out of this demo page. The pin block allows you to literally stick blocks to the screen, even though the viewer can keep scrolling. That particular thing will stay pinned in that spot. So for example, and this is not a great example, but this is the fast one that I just threw up here. So we've pinned the text block here and all 3 of these images. So as we continue to scroll through this section, the images will slide in place and stop, sort of like stacking on each other, and the originals will disappear. So let's just see what happens here. The Learn More button is going to stick at the top, and these images are going to slide up and stack until we get out of the section, and then everything goes back to normal. So to figure out how to recreate this effect, all you have to do is click on the element that you want and then select the pin icon. It will be black when it is, and it will be hollow when it's not being used. And then when it is being used, you can see when you hover over the block, you can see, let's see if I can, there we go. That tiny little light blue icon indicates that the pin is on for that thing. So before you even click on it, you can tell that the pin feature is being used for that element. And then when you do click, it'll be black to indicate that, yes, definitely it is being used. So if we want to recreate what I just had there, we've got a text block here and a shape block with the same color as the text block background to extend the color behind this image without allowing the text to accidentally get underneath this image, but it looks like it's one piece and they're interacting with each other visually. So we need to pin this one, and I had set them at 50 pixels from the top of the screen, so that's going to align it to the top and offset 50 pixels. You can actually change the slider to be whatever you want, but let's just do 50px here. And then this one was also set to 50px aligned to the top so that they will hit and stop and pin at the same exact spot. This one I set to 20 pixels from the top, so it will stop and pin when it gets just 20 pixels from the top of the screen. This one I set aligned to the top and offset 50 pixels. And same thing for this one. And this one, 50 pixel offset aligned to the top. So they will all sit in exactly the same place. And you can see this actually in edit mode too. So that's pretty easy to recreate. And then if you need to turn it off for any reason, all you have to do is click the pin icon, select the no button, remove pin, and that will actually unpin it. So it will scroll like normal. The cool thing is if some of these things pin and some of these things don't, then the effect you get is that these things are kind of floating around at different speeds and it feels more engaging and interactive. But you just want to be careful that wherever you pin it on the screen, whatever it is not going to cover up valuable text or buttons. So you do kind of want to be careful using this feature. You'll probably also want to check this on mobile to make sure that these are going to react the way that you expect they will, or you can just not pin anything on mobile. That would probably be the smarter move. So by default, it looks like Squarespace is going to have the pin not functioning on mobile, which is probably the best policy. So we'll just change the layout a bit and call that a day. The last feature we're going to cover is the hide header and footer feature, and this is actually in the page settings. So if you click on the gear wheel to access the page settings, you now have an option under general called navigation. And if you turn the toggle off for show header, it will not show the header. And the same thing for the footer. So this would allow you to create your own sales pages that don't have a header or footer. So they look like standalone sales pages that you might have seen in something like lead pages, but you can create them on Squarespace. So that is a pretty handy feature to have, and you could actually hide the header but keep the footer and vice versa if you want to. They're independent of each other. So if I did that, then I would be able to potentially add a logo up here at the top. Pretend that's a logo. So if you had this as your sales page, you could have a logo at the top, and you notice if you hover over that image, it actually changes to a pointer that indicates that it's clickable. And if you click that, it would take you to whatever page you linked it to. So that could be essentially the way for them to get back to your homepage on your website if you want them to be able to, if they know that that's what it is. Otherwise, they could scroll down potentially and get to it from your footer if you kept that on, but just turned the header off. I hope that was helpful for you. The scale text and the highlight feature were introduced maybe a year or so ago as of recording this, but not that many people know what those buttons actually do, and especially the scale text feature still confuses people. So I wanted to make sure we covered that in addition to the two new features, which are the pin block and the header footer option, where you can hide the header and footer. So anyway, I hope that was helpful for you. If you want more tips and tricks like this for Squarespace, make sure you like and subscribe so that you can get more like this showing up in your feed, and also leave a comment below if you want to know more about any of the features we covered today, and I can do a video specifically on that. In the meantime, if you want more content on Squarespace, or if you're thinking, I understand mostly these features, but I just don't know what to put on the page, maybe check out this video next where I walk you through some of the guides that I have that are templated on my website that will walk you through what to put on every single page. That's all I have for you in this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye!